Kevin, I've just had the pleasure of hearing your panel. You talked about your long-term dream of coming home on a Friday evening after a long work week and said opening a beer and imagining raising money a much easier way, not the old-fashioned.
It's absolutely true. I have this image of a paycheck being cut somewhere in Omaha or Salt Lake City, and $2.19 coming into some account we've set up at Pantheon to invest in private equity from a defined contribution plan, which would be a brand new way of raising money. But I think the time has come.
And this would just be a weekly deduction. It would just flow into an account.
Yeah, the way an individual retirement plan works in a 401k plan is every time a company runs a payroll, every individual will have a predetermined amount deducted from their salary, and typically the company matches it. And it all gets funneled into a record keeper like a Fidelity or a Vanguard or a T. Rowe Price, and it gets invested. And I think some of it should be invested in private equity.
But historically, the defined benefit plans that have been managed by plan sponsors, professional managers, they've been the overwhelming source of capital for the industry.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, right now, pension plans globally, most of which are defined benefit plans, contribute approximately 50% of the $1.7 trillion that's invested in private equity.
But they're a declining business, basically. They're a dinosaur. They're going out of business. For what sort of quick reasons would you cite?
Well, the quick reason is it's complicated enough to run a big company in this complicated world that we live in, and managements have decided that they don't want to increase the complexity by also being money managers and running a defined benefit pension plan. Now, most of them are setting up defined contribution pension plans, but generally they're taking a much more simple, streamlined approach to those. And at the end of the day, the company's not on the hook for the results in a defined contribution plan the way they are in a defined benefit plan. So almost universally, companies are getting out of that business, freezing the pension plans, buying them out, terminating them as soon as they can. And even state and local pension plans are starting to look at the same things. You see some of the lawsuits and union actions that are taking place in places like Illinois these days. That's the beginning of that process in the public sphere.
So the huge shift in the landscape in the pension world. What are the quick reasons why DC defined contribution plans don't back private equity today?
It's mainly mechanical and cultural reasons. The mechanical reasons are it's private equity, it takes 3 or 4 years to get ramped up in, and that's something that defined benefit plans have been happy to do, and it hasn't disadvantaged anybody. But if you try to do that with these individual accounts, the early accounts are going to experience the J curve and the long lag in getting their money invested, and then subsequent investors are going to come in and have a fully invested portfolio. The equity of that doesn't quite match up. Second of all, although it's not legally required, the culture of this industry has been one where people are used to being able to make changes in their investment choice on a daily or a weekly basis. And even more important, they want to log onto a website and see what happens every day in terms of their account going up in value or down in value. So you've got to be able to provide the same sort of daily pricing that the public money managers do for a private equity portfolio. And both of these things can be handled. We've developed a product where we can handle both daily pricing.
We'll come back to how you crack that nut, but if we just say you had some very reputable financial statistics that showed in this presentation between 1997 and 2001, defined benefit plans with exposure to private equity and had a 140 basis point outperformance over those approximately 15 years. So
yes.
7.8% return versus 7.2 versus 5.8. So really a big gap, which you said was pretty much down to the fact of private equity on the one side of the ledger and an absence of it on the other, on the DC side.
Yeah, there are some other things. I mean, some hedge fund involvement, although that's been much more recent than private equity. Private equity it's the asset class that defined benefit plans have invested in for 30 years, and it's almost bar none been the best performing asset class that they've invested in. And so the big delta, the biggest chunk of that 140 basis points, and it's pretty uncontested by virtually everybody I've met with, is the inclusion or not inclusion of private equity.
So that's a very good thing. Let's translate that down to the man on the street, the woman on the street with their DC plan. What does this mean for them in terms of financial
I mean,
security?
it's hundreds and thousands of dollars of retirement income, depending on how long they basically have a career or maintain that account.
Because there's a real social good here to aim for as well as a business
Absolutely.
proposition. So how are you going to crack this nut, just to finish up?
Well, basically, we think the way private equity should be delivered is not as a standalone option where the individual can sort of get a hunch and bet a bunch and then change their mind 6 months later, but it's dealing with an investment option that exists in virtually all 401k plans called a target date fund, which is a fund which is assembled by the plan sponsor, not the individuals, and it's assembled by having different asset classes, different managers, it's kind of a fund of funds in and of itself, and it could include a sleeve of private equity which would vary from, say, 10 or 12% when the individual is 25 years old, down to nearly nothing when the person is 65 years old. So it would have what's called a glide path. And because it's deemed to be the safest way for an individual to invest in a 401k, it's the default option. And the government sanctions it being the default option, meaning people who don't even know what to invest in automatically go into a target date fund. So we are promulgating a product that would provide that sleeve in a target date fund. It will provide daily liquidity. We will have daily pricing for it. And we will use the secondary private equity market to get the money invested on day one and then migrate the portfolio into a standard primary, partially secondary, partially primary portfolio over time.
Sounds fascinating. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope we can come back this time next year with
and hopefully tell you about a success.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
Kevin.